What world will you build?
Yeah, this game's mid. Paradox Interactive is a game studio well known for their great strategy games and their unique takes on the RTS genre. They're pretty much responsible for creating the modern grand strategy genre as we know it. Releasing EU1 in 2000, Paradox has developed several of the most beloved games in the genre, and you've likely either heard of or have played at least a few of them. Crusader Kings 2 and 3, Europa Universalis 4, Hearts of Iron 4, and of course, Victoria 2. Despite being a 12-year-old game, Vicky 2 is probably the most beloved and fondly remembered game Paradox has released to date, and it's probably also one of the most fun, because even though the game has certainly shown its age in a few ways, considering there's an invincible army template that the AI can never beat, it still never gets old. In the 4 years that I've personally been playing the game, I personally must have formed the German Empire, Yugoslavia, and Italy a dozen times each at least, with each playthrough being more fun than the last. And I've had even more fun forming the ultimate country in the game, Romania, the only European nation that has at least half of its national GDP coming from the stolen wallets of tourists. So naturally, when a sequel to this cherished game was announced in 2021, I and many others were hyped. And even if you aren't a Paradox fan, you've undoubtedly heard of this game from somewhere if you are at least a strategy game fan. And here we are in October of 2022. The game is out. All the r/history redditors are rushing to their computers to form Germany. All the Serbian boomers are rushing out to form Yugoslavia. And the racist femboy you talk to on the ISP Discord server is rushing out to win the American Civil War as the Confederacy.
Oh, wow! That is relatable!
That was, of course, until...
Vor der Kaserne, vor dem großen Tor, steht eine Laterne, steht sie noch davor. Dort wollen wir uns wiedersehen, bei der Laterne wollen wir stehen, wie einst Lili Marleen, wie einst Lili Marleen.
Now, to be fair, going forward, I personally don't hate this game. I actually do enjoy it. It is very fun for what it is, but having about 20 hours on this game, even though the game's only been out for like 2 days as of me writing this, I do have to agree, this game is mid. Pretty mid, actually. And even though I am personally overall enjoying the game, I can understand why a lot of people aren't. Why? Well, for a lot of reasons. Be prepared to hear a lot of comparisons to Vicky 2. Let's get the most controversial issue with this game out of the way first. You can't command divisions in this game. To put it simply, armies are automatically formed by building barracks buildings, and recruiting generals who would then automatically take those units under their command. You of course can also build conscription centers which tack on conscript units to your military that you can mobilize in times of war, which will bolster your numbers greatly, though they are of lesser quality than your regulars. Well, I say to put it simply, but that's actually literally all there is to it. But if you can't actually command divisions, how do you fight wars in this game? Under your military tab, you have a list of your generals. When at war, you can tell your generals to do one of 3 things once you have mobilized their men. Attack a front line, defend a front line, or stand by, which that does nothing.
I don't know which one of these mincing things that I like.
Now, I'll be brave in saying that I don't really hate this system, and honestly that's because it works fine for what it is. But despite thinking it's a passable system and that there's nothing inherently wrong with it in theory, it feels so incredibly empty. Like, I seriously can't even design army templates for my generals. I can't do anything to drill or improve the quality of my troops outside of researching better tech. There's no distinction between cavalry and infantry or mechanized units in the late game. There are just regulars and conscripts, whatever that even entails. And the generals themselves are very bare bone. While it's nice they can have political legitimacy and popular support among your population for doing things like winning battles, can I really not customize their traits and skills at all? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not asking for something as in-depth as what's in Hoi 4, a game that has 6 years worth of patches and expansions under its belt, but come on, given that you're taking direct control of battles away from the player, you ought to have added some mechanics to help make up for it, like an officer core or a unit design feature, just to ensure some kind of peace of mind. But hey, I guess that's what future DLC is for, right?
Money!
Well, not that I'm really one to judge, considering I pre-ordered the Swiss focus tree for 20 bucks. And while we're on the topic of war, how the fuck do battles even work? I've been making an honest effort to try and observe every battle I fight in, just to see what goes into winning or losing one. And I can't honestly tell what anything on the battle screen even means. And oh my fucking god, attritional damage in this game is broken as hell. Once as Brazil, on a single campaign that lasted just a few months, I lost nearly 65,000 soldiers to attritional damage alone. That's more losses than what the entire Allied nations lost in the Paraguayan War in 6 years worth of fighting in real life. Not that this attritional damage means much anyway, considering I keep winning nearly every war I fight. In fact, I think the only battle I've ever lost in a war so far while playing Victoria 3 was when I was playing as Brazil and a single one of my divisions was attacked by a 20-stack French army in Uruguay. Now, I know it might sound a bit asinine to criticize how easy winning wars in Victoria 3 is, considering that Vicky 2 literally has an invincible army template that you can exploit the shit out of. But at least there, being invincible is only optional rather than being a core feature, and some of the units required for the template are locked behind certain technologies anyway. And speaking of technology, the way your society functions and develops and how you went about international affairs were honestly the things I was looking forward to the most in Vicky 3. Personally, I wasn't all that disappointed when it was announced you couldn't personally command armies. I was much more hyped over the idea of Victoria 3 being the political equivalent to Hoi 4, where Hoi 4 is a game that takes a backseat from political mechanics to focus on in-depth military design. I was hoping Vicky 3 would be politically in-depth rather than militarily in-depth. And it is very unfortunate that I must inform you that is not the case at all. I'll go ahead and start off by saying some good things though. For one thing, internal politics are actually extremely well done in my opinion, and they're probably my favorite part of the game. The sheer amount of laws and reforms you can pass in your country are amazing, and I love how you can't go full out in deciding what's legal and illegal, as various left and right-wing parties will either support or oppose everything you try to do. A simple example, outlawing slavery. Pretty much every big country minus Canada at the start of a Vicky 3 game in the Western Hemisphere will have slavery legalized. And while in a country like the US, a large amount of people will support outlawing slavery, mainly liberal parties, pretty much every conservative party will oppose any effort to ban it. And in countries like Brazil, when you go to establish even a basic school system, there are various aspects to the school system law you're trying to select that you must choose between. For example, if you decide to make your school system desegregated to make racial and native minorities happy, parts of your conservative and nationalist populations will get pissed off at you. If you make your schools unisex, your Catholic population will get mad at you. That's not even a joke, by the way. But the more of a progressive approach you take to these micro-policies will make liberals happy with you. So making decisions in regards to passing laws and policy must have a level of awareness of your population and political supporters, instead of just passing laws in regards to what you as the player believe are morally and politically correct, which makes for a much more realistic and historically accurate internal politics sim. Not to mention all of the government types you can switch between if certain criteria are met, which makes for a much more personal feel. And these types of decisions go for every law and reform you try passing. So there is no shortage of internal political fun to be had. If only the same could be said for external politics though. I'm not gonna lie, in terms of being an international political sim, Vicky 3 is much more basic than Victoria 2 is. Much more basic. The game honestly kinda sucks in this regard in my opinion. Let's take the formation of North Germany and the German Empire. Now unlike in Vicky 2, I haven't formed Germany in Vicky 3 as of now, so I'm largely going off what I've seen the AI do, take that for what you will because the AI blows, and how forming nations in Vicky 2 works. Starting off with Vicky 2 where my authority mainly lies, to form North Germany, you must have all of the North German states, including Saxony, within your sphere of influence. And to form the German Empire, you must own Alsace-Lorraine and have the South German states within your sphere of influence. This is, of course, all under the guise that you're a major power, which if you're even halfway decent at Vicky 2, shouldn't be a challenge at all to keep under your belt when playing as Prussia. In the process of going from Prussia to North Germany to the German Empire, there are 2 mandatory wars and 2 optional wars you have to wage. In the case of North Germany, a mandatory war to secure the culturally North German Danish client state of Schleswig-Holstein, and an additional optional war to steal Saxony from Austria's sphere of influence, and adding it to yours. Assuming you have the nationalism and imperialism tech researched by the time you secure Holstein and Saxony, you then get an event to form North Germany, automatically annexing all the North German countries in your sphere. To go from that to the German Empire, you must fight a mandatory war to secure the border region of Alsace-Lorraine from France, and fight an optional war to secure Württemberg, Baden, and Bavaria from Austria's sphere. Once you've taken possession of Alsace-Lorraine and secured the South German states, you can then activate the event to form the German Empire and reap all the overpowered rewards. Notice how I labeled the 2 wars to secure all the required nations in Austria's sphere as optional. If you're not aware, stealing sphered nations from the other great powers in Vicky 2 can be done peacefully without ever even firing a shot, and with political strategies every bit as keen as militaristic strategies. It all stems from how many nations you're influencing at one time, and how close you are to them in both the literal and cultural sense. If you play your cards right, forming the German Empire can be done as quickly as 1850 or 1851, 20 years quicker than it took to form in real life. In Vicky 3, however, which ironically was touted as a game where political strategy trumped military action, you will have to fight much more than just 2 wars to form Germany near as I can tell. Instead of having a system in place that allows you to heavily or lightly influence nations, making them hate or like certain nations, and banning the diplomats of other great powers that you thought might try to steal them from you, you have the market system, which sorta acts like a sphere of influence, I guess. What sucks about this system? Well, nothing, but that's pretty much because there's nothing worth commenting about that comes from this quote-unquote system. Now, again, I haven't personally formed any formable nations in Vicky 3 as of yet, but as far as I can tell, there's no way of reliably influencing smaller nations. It seems the only ways of getting smaller nations into your market sphere is for them to ask you if they can join, or if you ask them to join your sphere. And I think them offering to do so or accepting to do so is based on how high your opinions are of each other, which is not good. Like, yeah, tiny little Brunswick might be happy to join your market, but Hanover always seems to fucking hate Prussia's guts, regardless of how much you try to change that. The only way to guarantee Hanover likes you: war. The only way to mop up the North German states who always manage to never join in on unification: war. Spheering the South German states, that'll definitely require a war, if not multiple wars. This all on top of the mandatory wars you have to fight eventually against France and Denmark. Yes, Victoria 3, the game that supposedly requires a smarter approach to diplomacy to do good, requires more wars than the previous game to form Germany. It's completely ridiculous. I hate it. I can only imagine how bad it must be to form Italy or Yugoslavia. It's a total waste of potential. And that's really the best way to sum up almost everything involved in regards to international politics. Wasted potential. Want to add war goals after a war starts? Nope. Crises that start large-scale world wars? No, every war is essentially a mini crisis anyway. Reliable intervention in foreign wars? Nope. Sabotage of any kind? What are you, insane? That's definitely gonna be a DLC. Just so much stuff that's all either half-baked or just cut out altogether. God damn, where did the Victoria 2 features go? Victoria 3 should at least have everything from Victoria 2. It's a fucking 12-year-old game. Oh my God, it's so bad. I'm not done yet though, am I? No, we need to talk about technology. Now, there's nothing wrong with the technology tree. It's honestly at least on par with Victoria 2's. The problem lies with the fact that the tree is universally adopted by every playable nation, even by nations that historically speaking wouldn't have been able or willing to research or embrace various things in this tech tree. China uses this tree, Sokoto uses the tree, Ethiopia uses the tree. So what? These nations are just on par with European nations in terms of tech? This despite the fact that the reason these nations were bullied so much in real life is because they were so far behind Europe? Like, really? Why is there no westernization system like in Victoria 2? Countries like China should honestly start with a tech tree that's far behind the main tree that they can switch from once they fully fill it out. That way, events like the Opium Wars and Scramble for Africa can feel more grounded in reality. Speaking of the Scramble for Africa, you can actually just scramble for Africa whenever you want. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's pretty cool that all of these African kingdoms and tribes have been added to the map. But if it's literally impossible to play as them anyway for whatever fucking reason, then you might as well remove them to limit the amount of blitzing that literally any country can commit on Africa. Or at least make it impossible to fight an aggressive war with them until a much later date. Do something to limit how easy it is to conquer Africa and how early you can do it. I once saw France conquer like the entire east coast of Africa in like 1850. It's outrageous. And also, why the hell do Mexico and the US like never start the Mexican-American War? Now, I know it's dumb to pick apart ahistorical events. I mean, Vicky 2 is no stranger to batshit insane map painting, but at least there is a general timeline of events. The Scramble for Africa always starts at the beginning of the late game, the US always goes through with Manifest Destiny, and Germany usually forms around the mid-game assuming that Prussia doesn't get its ass kicked in the early game. Victoria 3 isn't that good kind of batshit, however. It's just immersion breaking and annoying to look at. Also, what the hell, Paradox? You had 12 years. 12 years to fix this shit. Meh, it's not awful.
But it's not that good.
Is it better than Victoria 2's economy and industrial systems? No, not really. Now, even though there's literally no one on Earth who can tell you how the economy works in Victoria 2, including the developers, by the way, it's still easy to get the hang of because there are certain trends and mechanics that make themselves very obvious and are thus easy to follow. In every region in Victoria 2, there are certain RGOs in each province of that region, whether they be wheat, wood, fruit, coal, iron, rubber, silk. They're all there for you to find. In these regions, you build factories that use those specific RGOs to produce products. Furniture and paper use wood, for example, steel mills use iron, cement and glass works use coal, fertilizer uses sulfur, etc., etc. And those products can then in turn be used for various functions and manufactured goods. Cement and steel can be used to construct more factories and more railroads. Fertilizer and steel are used to produce ammo and explosives, which are then used in arms and artillery factories. Iron, cattle, and fruit and wheat make canned goods. Glass and fruit make wine, and on and on. There's a lot that everything is used for. These goods are then either exported to other countries for profits, or put in a national stockpile to build more buildings and railroads with, or are consumed by pops and military units. Victoria 3 in essence isn't really different. It's just far more annoyingly designed. First off, construction. How? How do you fuck up construction, you might ask? Well, to understand how construction is fucked up in 3, let's look at construction in 2. Remember how I brought up the national stockpile mechanic of Victoria 2? Whenever you order a structure to be built in a region, you have to pay the initial price of commissioning the building. Then a relatively small amount of money is pulled from your daily income rate to pull the materials needed out of your national stockpile. If a certain material or good is missing from the stockpile, a buy order is automatically filled onto the trade market to fill in the deficit. This comes with certain penalties, however. It'll delay the building process while the goods are in transfer, for one thing, and more of your daily income is spent than if you already had the goods domestically supplied, and it'll be for a longer period. Simply put, in Victoria 2, the more goods you domestically produce and stockpile, the cheaper and more efficient it'll be to further expand your industry, infrastructure, and military. The less domestically produced goods you have, the more expensive and less efficient the process of developing your country will be. It's as simple as it is intuitive, challenging, and more importantly, as it is fun to master. How does it work in Victoria 3? Good question. I don't fucking know. Literally, it seems no matter what stage I'm at in Victoria 3, whether it's the early, mid, or late game, building too much just fucking makes my GDP and my income go down. Doesn't matter if it's agriculture or industry related, it costs a fucking premium apparently. At first when this started happening, I figured that maybe I was importing stuff to construct these projects. That would make sense, right? Alright, it's not too far off from Victoria 2's system. So I tried looking for a stockpile option to see what I was low on, and couldn't manage to find a stockpile list anywhere. All I could do was build up and hope the production situation fixed itself. It also didn't help that instead of a single or a few big fees for construction work, you're constantly bleeding money whenever construction is occurring. Now, to be fair, regardless of how bad you are at construction and industry in this game, you know, like me, it's pretty much impossible to go bankrupt. And as far as I can tell, the radicals that like to pop up don't really seem to do much when your GDP goes down, at least if it's only for a little bit. So honestly, don't use strategy when building. Just build whatever you want or think you need. It works just as well as anything else. It's an ANCAP type of world, I guess. It's also paradoxical, no pun intended, how Victoria 3's economy managed to be stupidly simplistic and overly complex at the same time. Like, okay, I can't find a stockpile anywhere, so I'm assuming there's no true stockpile system in the game, and building is limited only by how many pounds you're willing to burn. Extremely blunt and empty-headed. So why is it that I also at the same time feel the need to be an economic theorist with a degree in business management in order to understand anything going on here? I mean, Victoria 2 has only one real trade screen in the whole game, and even that can be a bit intimidating. So how do you think I felt when an idiot like me laid his eyes on this shit? Sell and buy orders? What the hell are those numbers? Why am I selling and buying so much shit? And what are these balance numbers relative to? My pops? How much of this stuff is already stored in my country? Balance? Like how much I'm pulling in revenue? Or no, that can't be right because the market price is right there. And what fucking market? The international market or just my own local market? Trade routes? Create new routes? Why do I need to do that? Can't there be an automated option for this? Convoys needed for trade? How do I build more convoys? Are they automatically built in ports? Do I need to expand existing ports? Or is this wholly for now and I need to manage port production? Just fuck. I'm just gonna forget this entire tab exists.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would.
Everyone died. The end.
So, that for the most part was a lot of complaining. So much that you might end up walking away from this video thinking that I hate this game. But I do feel the need to reiterate that honestly, I don't think Victoria 3 is a bad game. Why? Well, because I genuinely do think it's a fun game to play, and there are moments to be had where you will feel an equal rush of excitement as if you were playing Victoria 2. But that kind of is the crux of the matter though, right? That I mentioned those moments are equal to Victoria 2's own moments? They shouldn't be equal to Vicky 2. They should be superior. Vicky 2 is a 12-year-old game released all the way back in 2010. Victoria 3 is supposed to be a cutting-edge 2022 game and is supposed to be far more advanced. When this game released, I ought to have felt the need to uninstall Victoria 2 and make way to permanently replace it with this brand new game. But no, at its best, Victoria 3 is on par with 2, and in many regards it even falls flat in comparison. The one and only thing that 3 unequivocally does better than 2 is domestic diplomacy, but I doubt that that on its own is something that most people are willing to buy this game at full price for. And even though I do believe this is a fun game, if you want my brutally honest opinion, do not buy it yet. Not unless you really feel the need to. Wait a few months for this game to be patched out and maybe given an expansion, or just wait for whenever it's on sale. Because in its current state, $50 is a blasphemous pricing point. Because unfortunately, this is not the game we were all hyped for. And it is certainly not the game that most Victoria 2 fans were expecting. To close out, I think ISP said it best. Meh. It's a 6 out of 10.